Ukraine war, UK has no choice but to continue support, says Johnson. Boris Johnson has said the UK has no choice but to stay the course and support Ukraine until Russian forces are defeated. Under Mr. Johnson, the UK supplied £2.3 billion to Ukraine after Russian forces invaded the country on February 24. His successor as Prime Minister, Liz Truss, has pledged to match or exceed this support through 2023. We must double down in our defense of the Ukrainians, Mr. Johnson said in the House of Commons. The former PM, who now sits as a backbench MP, said any deal with Russian President Vladimir Putin would send a signal around the world that violence does pay off. There is absolutely no sign that Putin either wants such a compromise or can be trusted to deliver it, he added. That is why we have absolutely no choice but to stay the course, to stay resolute. If Putin is going to double down on his aggression, we must double down in our defense of the Ukrainians. During a debate on the situation in Ukraine, Mr. Johnson admitted rising energy prices meant times are tough for families. But, he argued, the UK has the economic muscle to help families with fuel bills, as well as secure an independent energy supply through the use of more nuclear and much more wind. Mr. Johnson described recent advances by the Ukrainian army as a turning point. Earlier this month, Ukrainian forces have pushed back Russian troops, retaking more than 6,000 square kilometers, 2,317 sq miles, in the space of 2 weeks. It is more vital than ever that we have the strategic patience to hold our nerve and ensure that the Ukrainians succeed in recapturing their territory, he said.